come. Here they go. Here they go. That's why.
USA.
Okay, so we're judging.
I'm never going to write it.
Probably say now you're the people with batteries and sandals.
Exactly. Go Black Soldier.
We know where all of you live. We have the.
I didn't know it was going to be this interactive. I love it.
It's fun. It's fun. Go back to Germany! Boo! Yeah. I know.
I thought this was fun. My heart and that's the people that like right there.
40th was up on the second floor of the house. Some of them went up into the attic. A few of them even went up onto the roof.
Roll back.
A word about the weapons that you see being used. These are reproductions of 18th century flintlock muskets. A good soldier was supposed to be able to load and fire 3 times a minute. What that meant was that the musket fire was inaccurate. So soldiers were taught to stand in tight ranks and fire volleys, and some of the musketry would hit their opponents. Most of it missed. But you don't want to get hit with an 18th century musket ball. The British muskets are 75 caliber, and they fire a 69 caliber round lead ball, which at 50 yards, think of a football field, you're in the end zone, they're on the 50-yard line. At 50 yards, one of those musket balls was known to go through 2 soldiers and into a third. If the musket ball hits a bone, it's going to flatten itself out and it's going to shatter the bone. It's going to create a compound fracture. So if you get wounded, your opponent usually pulls back. Other Revolutionary battles is that as the shooting started, ground started to form. If you're out in the countryside this time of year, you'll see this phenomenon early in the morning. At the dew point this time of year, because the seasons have changed, and it would rain in the air. So visibility during this battle was one of the features of it. The British could not see where the American attacks were coming from. And to them, it appeared that Americans were popping in and out of the fog all over the place. But that was a double-edged sword. The Continental forces couldn't see where they were going in some cases. As the American reserves So he ordered the Adjutant General Timothy Pickering to tell Sullivan to slow down his rate of fire. Pickering rode down the Sullivan about 400 yards below Cliveden, delivered the order to slow the rate of fire. As Pickering came back up Germantown Avenue, musket balls started whizzing by his head. And he turned his head to the right, and he saw the gun flashes on the second floor of Cliveden. So he rode out of range to tell Washington that British troops were in this house. There were 4 American cannons parked across the street who started firing at the house. Pickering saw that they were firing at the house on an angle, and if you look at the side wall of the house, you can see the marks from the battle on the side of the house. Pickering told the artillery to move down and fire directly on the front of the house instead. When Colonel Pickering told Washington that British troops were in this house, a discussion turned into an argument. Washington's aides recommended he simply put a regiment around the house and hold the British in. But the only general that was there at that moment was Henry Knox, the chief of artillery, who said it was unmilitary to leave a castle in the rear of your army. So he recommended they attack the house and drive the British out. Knox further recommended that the British in the house should be given a chance later. There's no British mention in any of the primary accounts of an attempted truce, so we assume that they didn't see that the guy who had a white flag. However, the American forces were furious that the guy down. So they redoubled their efforts to storm the house. They're going to bombard the house with 3- and 4-pound cannonballs for a few minutes, only to realize that firing a 4-pound cannonball is simply going to ricochet off that stonework on the front of the house. After the reenactment, if you go up and look at the house closely, especially the front steps, you'll see chips out of the steps. The first shots from the cannons across the street blew the front doors right off their hinges. The 40th Regiment piled the wrecked front doors and whatever furniture they could into the opening of the front doorway. Realizing that cannonballs were not going to knock the walls of the house down, the Americans changed tactics. They're going to shower the house with grape shot and have infantry storm the house under the cover of the grape shot. So the 1st and 3rd New Jersey regiments were chosen to storm the house, while the 2nd and 4th New Jersey provided covering fire along with the artillery. Rounds of grape shot, showering the house with it, and then halfway up the driveway, the New Jersey troops charged. And as soon as the grape shot hit the house and was done, the British troops in the house opened fire with everything they had. The New Jersey troops After the first storming failed, some of General Sullivan's aides, along with a few of Washington's aides, decided they were going to try to burn the house to the ground. So they went over to the carriage house and barn and got some straw, crept up along the north side of the house here with burning straw, and attempted to set the shutters or the door on the side of the house on fire. One of Washington's aides was shot from a basement window there at the north corner of the house. Among his aides and some of the other officers. Alexander Hamilton was one of those aides, and he said he and his recommended he simply post a regiment around the house in. But the only general that was there at that moment was Henry Knox, the chief of the American artillery. And he told Washington that there was a military that it's unmilitary to leave a fortified castle in your rear. Knox recommended that you drive these British troops out of the house. Earlier, they could hear all this bombardment, so part of them, General Woodford's brigade, came up behind Clifton. They had 4 cannons. They started firing at the back of the house, while Proctor's artillery is firing on it from the front. Some of the American accounts tell us that the British in the house had cannons and were firing cannonballs at them. The problem was the British weren't firing cannons. It was American artillery passing through the house or over it. It's what the military calls friendly fire. As Wayne's troops advanced back towards the house, another part of General Greene's column under General Adam Stevens, they're coming down Limekiln Pike, and in the fog and smoke they see this beautiful battle line with fixed bayonets coming at them in the fog from the direction of the British camp. They assumed they were British troops because they're coming from that direction and they are in a nice bayonet charge, so they open fire, and it turns out it's Wayne's troops advancing back towards the house. Wayne's troops suddenly get shot at by these Virginians in the fog and smoke. They think it's the British counterattack, so they turn and start firing back. That confusion, we don't know how many troops were taken out by friendly fire there, but it caused a huge gap in the American battle line. Between the fences, the roads, houses, orchards, and so forth, the American attack started to fall to pieces. It was uncoordinated, and the guys lost contact with each other. But the British were just as confused because they couldn't see the whole American attack because of the fog and smoke. Some American troops actually made it into the middle of Germantown at Market Square. The 9th Virginia Regiment made it into Market Square and let out a cheer. They thought they had won the battle, and it let British troops a couple hundred yards away know that they were there, and so they knew we were running out. And that's what ended up happening. American troops firing off all their 40 rounds and realizing they're not going to get reinforced. So they start to fall back, one unit after another after another. By 8 a.m., the British are going to start a counterattack. And they're going to push up through Germantown and Germantown Avenue and behind the houses, and they watch the American attack vanish into the fog and smoke. Some of the British accounts indicate that the attack fell apart so fast, they thought it might be a trap. The British forces are going to pursue Washington's army all the way out to Fort Washington. The British Grenadiers are going to get up from Philadelphia just as the counterattack begins. So you'll see them coming in here from behind the house. This battle happened on a Saturday morning, October 4th. Saturday was market day. Normally the road would have had a lot of farmers bringing their produce in. There weren't no farmers on the road that morning, and the civilians of Germantown, those that had sense, took cover mostly in their basements. Some of the accounts tell us that parents were a little worried about some of their boys who they couldn't find, only to discover that kids had climbed up on the roofs of the houses to watch the battle. Typical guy thing. Back behind the line. One of the American surgeons from Connecticut, his name was Dr. Ebenezer Elmer, tells us in a letter to his father that he dressed 17 wounded men on the field and that he extracted musket balls from them. Some of them he extracted the musket balls by cutting in the back and pushing the bullet all the way through to the other side. This is a period when there's no antiseptic, no antibodies except what your white blood cells carry. If you have any anesthetic at all, it's liquor. He had a canteen full of whiskey that he used for his men. Saw him at the window and fired his musket at the British officer by mistake.
We could go over there and look.
It saved the French officer's life. They failed to set the house on fire. There were several attempts to storm the house, all of which failed. As this firing was all going on, it got louder and louder. Wayne's past the house already. They were half a mile down towards Schoolhouse Lane. They can hear all the shooting behind them. They're thinking it must be a counterattack behind them. Washington's army withdrew from this battle all the way to Schwenksville. It's 24 miles. The wounded that were picked up by the American forces were put into wagons and sent to Reading. Now, if you got injured in Germantown today with a gunshot wound and were put in an ambulance and sent to Reading, you probably would be a little upset. Can you imagine being put into a wagon? It might take 2 or 3 days for you to get there simply because the road is full of snow. Not just Reading was where Army hospitals were set up. In Germantown itself, churches, barns, stables were all turned into temporary hospitals. And on the road between here and Schwenksville, the old churches that are along Skipack Pike and Ridge Pike, a lot of them were turned into hospitals too. And you will see in their graveyards little mass graves of soldiers who were wounded at Germantown and then died at those hospitals. The total number of dead and wounded, we don't know absolutely. Washington wrote to the Board of War 2 days after this battle that he lost 152 men killed, about 300 wounded, and 400 or so taken prisoner. British accounts said they buried over 300 rebels, that they wounded 500 or 600, and that they took 452 prisoners. So the Americans admitted losing 1,052 men. The British accounts run as high as 2,000. The truth is somewhere between the two of them. If one of your limbs was hit with a musket ball and it shattered the bone, they would amputate your limb. The operation typically took about 20 minutes. And uniforms per se. Some units were similarly. A lot of them were wearing civilian clothes. A lot of them were wearing Captain British clothing, whatever they could. Constant problems during the Revolution with supplies. The country was very poor in those days, and we called ourselves the United States. The state back is very important. Not even crazy. Stevens is into war. We're now advancing towards the British troops nicely formed up. British because the Americans retreated so quickly, the British thought it was a trap. The guys disappeared into the fog. The battle was over by about 9 o'clock in the morning. By that time, the fog had dissipated. The battle smoke had not. In certain places in Germantown, the British had set fields of stubble on fire to add to the murk. But about 9 o'clock, the battle was over. The civilians, most of them sensibly took cover in their basements. Absolutely terrified, as you can imagine. The parents found their teenage sons missing, only to their sons had lined up killed by British or Hessian grenadiers with bands. The first thing you drop is your musket. Second thing you drop is your knife. The third thing you drop is your cartridge box. And chances are, if you're in a plowed field, you're going to jump right out of your shoes and run. And that means you're not blanket or shoes or resupplying the army and teaching the army discipline. Fight the army at Valley Forge after this battle. The army's going to go to Valley Forge in December. And the spring is the British counterattack was steady, but very slow and cautious. American attack fizzled too fast. Washington's army retreated from Germantown, ladies and gentlemen. if you were wounded and taken prisoner, the British surgeons would take care of you. After the Battle of Brandywine, General Howe requested that Washington send American doctors down to take care of the British wounded. One of those doctors was Dr. Benjamin Rush, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and also the chief surgeon of the Continental Army. Dr. Rush wrote a letter from Brandywine describing the American wounded and their situation there as prisoners. And he said that the British surgeons and the people who take care of the wounded are extremely professional. And he said they take care of our wounded as if they were their own. But he said, don't attribute it to their humanity. They absolutely hate us.